In addition to that, what are some other values you live by, right? Maybe moral codes or just ways you see the world. Like, what are some of like the core values to you as a person?
I think the number one thing that I've understood over my limited 19 years of experience is self-reliance. I think 100% you need to not follow a herd. You need to realize and understand what you're doing and the impact it has on you. I think too often people put not their fate, but their practice into the hands of other people, and they think that it's just going to benefit them. I think you really need to analyze what you're doing and what you're planning to achieve, and really see if what you're doing is matching with the goals you have. Because I don't think it's enough to say, I'm on the track team and I'm not getting faster. I don't think that's enough. I think you need to analyze, where are my deficiencies, what do I need to improve on, how can I incorporate things to improve that. And sometimes you have to make large decisions. Maybe you need to leave the team. In my instance, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's like, maybe you need to find a new coach. I don't know what it is, right? But I think you really need to analyze your situation for yourself, see how you think you can put yourself in a situation that maximizes your ability to achieve your goals, and then perform on it. Put every single waking hour that, if you can, into achieving that goal. I think analyzing your situation and relying on yourself is a really important goal that I think a lot of people can do, that need to develop. I really needed to develop it 2 years ago, and I'm glad I did, and it paid a lot of dividends. So.
Yeah, but self-reliance is hard, right? I mean, we kind of live for others' validation. We live for their opinions, and there's always so many voices we hear, like them telling me to do this. We spend most of the hours a day just consuming content, right? So most of us don't even know what we actually want, right? That self-conscious piece of it, self-reliance. Like, how can you be self-reliant if you don't even know what you want, right? So how would you say you developed this, considering it's such a difficult thing for people to really attain, like even the skill of just individual thinking, you know? How would you say you've developed that over time?
So I think I've developed it to a very specific goal, which was me running as fast as possible. And you're right, there's so many different places where you can consume content and you get so many conflicting opinions on how to train and how to get faster. For me, it was looking at what made sense to me and looking if it was somewhat based in science and somewhat based in reason, and not just bro science, as a lot of people like to call it. That was the first thing for me. I had to take training into my own hands for a year, because I thought that was the only way that I could improve at a certain timetable for me to get where I needed to be. I think in order to develop it, you need to spend a certain amount of hours understanding what it is you want to be good at, right? I think you need to acknowledge that people know more than you. You need to consume that content. Who you consume that content from is, I think, what makes the biggest difference. Because we're all, to a certain extent, taking information from other people. You can now process that content and see what makes sense for you, but you need to make sure the person you're getting that information from has whatever goal you aspire to, has that best interest in heart, right, at heart. If that person is going to be able to uplift you and get you to that place, and has information rooted in science or rooted in like actual work, then I think that is something that can be applied towards what you want to do. That's the first thing. Consuming content that is goal-oriented and towards what you want to do. The second part is you need to have almost blind faith, I'd say. You need to, I think having delusional optimism to a certain extent is beneficial, because if you don't truly believe in yourself, when times get hard and when you don't achieve the goals you wanted to in like your first test, or maybe it's your first track meet, or whatever it is, you might start doubting yourself. But I think if you maintain delusional optimism, I think that could be really beneficial. Now, it might not work out, but hell, if you achieve like at least something, or if you advance towards something you wanted to get, and you made some progress, and you enjoy what you're doing, there's no real harm done, right? Mm-hmm. So I think those delusional optimism, which is, I mean, you obviously, you should be somewhat realistic, but like, you want to be optimistic. I don't think having a pessimistic mindset is going to help you. And then also, where you get your content information from and how you apply that to what you want to do, I think those are the two most important parts for developing some ability of self-reliance.
Right. I like delusional optimism. It's a really cool concept, and I think the reason is because not everything has to always be a literal fact, right? Your beliefs drive a lot of your experience of the world, right? Whether it's true, whether it's not. the world is chaotic by nature, right? But by creating logic and reason and mental models, we make it more simple, like subconsciously, right? And just having beliefs that are positive about yourself, even if they're not true, they slowly start to become reality, right? Like I know in the beginning I talked about that identity piece, right? Really the real shifts will come when those beliefs align with like the beliefs of the identity, where basically like you believe you are that person, even if it might not literally be a fact, right? Like the results may not show it, but if you still tell yourself that this is true and you say it so much that it becomes a literal fact, it will drive you to becoming that person, right? The beliefs in your mind will literally just change the way you see the world. In addition to the consuming like content that's driven by people, like maybe by people that you consume the content of people who you aspire to be like, right? I think it's also useful to have periods of time to just think. And I think that's more rare today than ever because there's so many ways to escape thinking, right? Because you can go on your phone, you can waste time here, waste time there, right? I think scheduling time in the day to just think is very powerful because you're forced to kind of look inward. And a lot of people don't like that feeling. I would say I hated that feeling for a large part of my life, but times when I started to just force myself to sit down for 30 minutes and think, it's crazy how much your understanding of the world can just get better, right? Because you're not always reliant on like their voices and their words that are just kind of enter your brain on the surface level of your experience of the world, right? You kind of look deeper inward and you understand that why is this true? This belief that's in my mind, where did it come from? Oh, it came from that one person that said something mean to me 2 years ago, right? And then that one belief has been holding you back this whole time, right? I think just having time to go inward and thinking, whether it even be through journaling or whether it just be going on a walk, right? Having those times, I found that to be very powerful in my life. But what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I think for me, it wasn't necessarily blocking out 30 minutes. It was more so, I think the parts where I thought the most was after a bad loss. Like you obviously feel horrible, right? Because you spent months training and you didn't get what you want, even though the conditions should have allowed for the goal you wanted to achieve. And after every loss, you kind of sit there for like an hour or 2 hours. And you're like, why did this happen? Am I not good enough? You start doubting yourself a little bit. But I think those opportunities allow you to realize kind of why you're doing something, to develop your why. For me, it's like, yeah, my training didn't work. Maybe I can go back and figure out why it didn't work. Or maybe like I just got my math test back and I didn't get the grade I want. Maybe I can go figure out how I can go study better so I can achieve that. I think looking at your losses is an important way of thinking because it's also very goal oriented because you're analyzing what the practices you did to get there. You're looking at the result. You're figuring out why the practice didn't get you to that result. And I think that thinking is really important. So I would say that is really where most of my thinking came from. It was looking at my wins and looking at my losses and trying to be having as little emotion as possible because sometimes you can ride the highs of a win too much and you screw up your training for the next week if you don't get enough sleep because you think you're shit now and then you screw up the next meet, right? Or you could have trained as well as you wanted for your track meet and you could have had a bad meet, and if you doubt yourself and you don't realize that maybe you just had a bad day today, then you lose your confidence and you might lose your steam for the rest of the season. So I think looking at your wins and losses, analyzing why they happened, and really taking the time to think through them is an important skill to develop.
Yeah, I think the idea of the wins and losses is important, but I know it's also when you're looking at your losses, it's important not to get wrapped up in the emotion, right? I think some people are like overly hard on themselves post-loss, where they're going to think I'm horrible, I'm shit, and all these emotions are coming in, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important to establish that when you're looking at your losses, not coming from an emotional perspective, but more from an analytical perspective. Because I know for me, I have a problem where I'm a bit of an overthinker, and I'll see a loss or I'll see something bad happen, and I'll just go in spirals and spirals and spiraling, digging myself deeper into a hole, and it gets me to a very bad spot. So recently, I've actually been trying to think less when I lose, and more return to it from an analytical perspective when I'm in that spot that I can, right? And that's helped me a lot, right? Because if something bad happens or something negative happens, I try to just detach from it as soon as possible. Because I think it's dangerous to get wrapped up in those emotions. Like it can be very self-detrimental. But when I found that I detach from those emotions post-loss and maybe I come to it later, I feel like when I'm walking, I feel like I'm in a more of a better state to analyze it from an analytical perspective, where I can start to see things like line up better. But obviously, if you feel like you can analyze your losses with like a mature perspective and not like be overly dramatic about it, that's very powerful. But I think it takes time to develop that skill, and I think just being conscious about it, it's being conscious about shit. I'm being very emotional right now. that could help you a lot, you know.
Yeah, and honestly, I think a big part of it is from not letting your wins make you, like, not riding that high.
Like
Because
arrogance.
I think that if you achieve something you wanted, I think you should try and ground yourself a little bit, because what goes up must come down, right? If you get super excited and you ride that high for a while, eventually you're going to crash. It's just that if you stay a little bit more stoic and in the middle, and I'm not saying like don't be happy that you win. I'm just saying that don't get overly cocky, don't get overly confident and happy over your win, because realize that you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, right? So if you can be analytical about the wins, then the losses aren't going to drive you down too much, because you're a little bit more in the center. And I think that a lot of athletes are emotionally driven. I think that emotions are very powerful, and I think they could be driven towards a very productive means, but it's also just a roller coaster. Like, I mean, if you're from like an athletics perspective, if your emotions can seriously give you a ton of anxiety before a meet or like before competition, and it can make the whole process just unenjoyable. Whereas if you're like a little bit more relaxed about it, I think that you can kind of save yourself from a lot of that emotional stress that you're going to get from whatever you're doing. So staying in the middle, I think, is better for your mental health, better for your stress, but also stress is related to your performance. If you're able to stress less about something, be more analytical, then you're going to perform better. So I definitely think that realizing the power your emotions have and being able to control them or channel them in a way that's going to benefit the outcome is a skill that is crucial.
Yeah, and I really like the channeling your emotions piece, because I think 100% that is very powerful, right? A lot of the people I look up to, they only got there because they channeled a lot of negative emotion, right? Like, I'm a big believer of use what you got, right? Like, not everyone has like an ideal to live up to, or like a lot of positive thoughts. Like, some people are in a darker spot, but you can use that as well, right? Like, you can. I sometimes think like if you're in a really, really bad spot, which I don't think I've been there before, so I don't want to speak like out of place, but at least what I see is that if you're in a really dark spot, then you can use that as a mindset, as like, I have nothing to lose, right? And you can use the maybe pain you feel towards someone to drive you somewhere else. So, channeling your emotions can be very powerful. So I 100% agree. If you enjoyed that segment with Siddarth Karthodi, then you're gonna love the full episode. Hit the link in the description now to see the full 1 hour length podcast with Siddarth Karthodi.